So tonight's presentation is about end-of-life issues, making some plans, and really the gift that you give to anyone who loves you and would like to help you towards that end of life, live what you would like it to be. So this evening, our speaker is Don Reeder, a longtime member of Westside. I think it says here he joined around 1980, so that's for a while. Don has a private practice locally, and his area of concentration is estate planning and estate administration. And if you have any questions about those things, you surely can ask him, and he'll help us understand. He resides in Mahwah with his wife, Beth Forbes, and he has two grown children who he brought up at Westside. So, Don, we're just thrilled to have you here. We love your guidance, your stories, and your sense of humor. So thank you so much for being with us.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to do this. Thanks for putting it together. Thanks to whoever is out there. This whole Zoom thing is still kind of creepy as far as I'm concerned, but to whoever's out there, thank you all for participating. Yes, I say that I'm still in practice a little bit doing estate planning, but my wife is not here, and I can say that, but she wants me to be totally retired. So don't tell her that I actually am saying to people that I'm still doing some estate planning. But at any rate, I always start these things. I don't know, you get older, you just do things the same way. I always start this by quoting one of the great American philosophers. That's Woody Allen, of course. And he said famously, "I'm not afraid of dying. I just don't want to be there when it happens." And, I've used that a bunch of times, but for what we're talking about tonight, I think that's really applicable because it's, that's how people are. They intellectually can get into the fact that they're going to die and that it's okay in certain ways, but they really don't want to deal with it in a real level. And my experience is that in dealing with estate planning type matters, people really don't want to deal with end of life kinds of situations. Over decades, I'm kind of obviously exaggerating a little bit, but I will meet a client first time and say, "Hello, how are you, Mr. Smith?" And before they say hello to me, they come right on to me by saying things like, "I'm sorry, I haven't done this. I know I should have done this years before. But here I am." And then they say hello. So people have it on their mind. They're thinking about it, and they get it intellectually sometimes, but they very often just have a problem pulling the trigger. I also quote another story. The record in my office, and I've been doing this a few weeks, is that from the first meeting with a client to do essentially estate planning matters, but including some of the documents that we're going to be talking about tonight, until we finally signed the documents. That period of time, 9 years, was the record that I have for that. I wanted to start by quoting another American authority. That's Pat McGlade. And seriously, Pat did a daily devotional a couple of years ago when we did a similar kind of program, and I just thought it was very apropos, and it's a kind of a good way to start. Pat said, "And talking about our mortality is very difficult for many. It's not easy to contemplate our dying. Yet, having conversations with those around us about our lives and what makes them meaningful, as well as our concerns and wishes for care near the end of our earthly sojourn, is another way to affirm life." In the words of, hope I pronounce it right, Atul Gawande, whose book we read at that time, "Our ultimate goal is a good life to the very end." So I'm going to talk about some practical and real world kinds of things. And start, I guess, with, well, I might just as well get this out. Let's start with a sexist comment. I have to report that my experience over decades of doing this work is that generally women ask better questions and are clearer about their intentions than men. Sure. Women are more insightful and interested In fact, frankly, men seldom ask any questions at all. Perhaps this is because women are the caretakers in our society. Maybe you have your own reasons for thinking that's the case, but I absolutely find that that's the case. So my job generally is dealing with estate planning matters, which most of us think of as being how we're going to leave things, and that's dealing with wills and trusts and that sort of thing. But there are many other documents that are involved in estate planning, and many other documents that are involved in end of life kind of planning, and we're going to talk about some of them: power of attorney and living will, which are legal documents. Non-legal kinds of documents, such as the post form, we'll talk about a little bit. DNRs, do not resuscitate forms, DNH, which is do not hospitalize, and the whole concept of medically assisted dying, which is now legal in New Jersey. Just a couple of things that are dealt with actually usually in a will. We're not talking about wills tonight, but definitely have to do with end-of-life planning. Jersey now allows us to appoint a funeral agent, someone to have responsibility for what our funeral arrangements, and well, we usually have some idea of arrangements, but for doing funeral arrangements and handling that whole aspect of things. And this is an area where you think, well, maybe there isn't too much disagreement, but I can't tell you how many cases there are where people's urns are sitting on the mantle because there's disagreement with the kids about where things should go and how things should be settled. It really is the case. And appointing a funeral agent accomplishes a couple of things. First of all, in doing that, you're going to be thinking about funeral arrangements, which is very important. I mean, consider when a person dies, there's just an obviously a traumatic kind of situation created. And if you have thought about, preferably planned in some detail anyway, what you want to have happen, it just makes that whole experience so much easier and allows for the grieving to be done in a way that it should be done and not worried about making arrangements and that sort of thing. The other thing that is typically handled in a will is cremation. If you want to be cremated, you should express that intention. That's become more popular. 20 years ago or so, people wanted to be cremated, and there was a lot of typically family conflict, and it was not just kind of an acceptable thing. These days, it's much more so. But if you want to be cremated, you should definitely express that intention. All right, I want to talk about powers of attorney. And what we're talking about is a document that's called a general durable power of attorney. General, it's called general because it handles everything. I call it a kitchen sink document. It's 13 pages. Mine, the one that I do, is 13 pages, and it's just a dreadful document. I recommend it to people if they have trouble sleeping. Take this to sleep with them, and it's better than an Ambien, no question about it. But it has to be that kind of way, because the way our society has developed and the laws that have been passed lately, everybody that you want to have accept this document wants to see a clause in there that covers their particular kind of situation, whether it's stockbrokers and whatever else, or paying taxes. IRS wants to see that you've named them, gifting, all kinds of financial, material kinds of matters are covered with the power of attorney. But also in New Jersey, most of us cover what I call personal care matters. There's kind of not a dichotomy really, but two different areas that are covered. And the personal care area covers normal medical decisions, not life and death. That's going to be the living will that we'll chat about at some length, but normal medical kinds of decisions. In other words, just as a married couple, or if you're single, children, whoever it is, you have an accident on 17, you hurt your knee and you're unconscious, can't make decisions for yourself, and someone has to make decisions for you. Power of attorney handles that. Decisions for rehab, decisions as we get further along and have more perhaps cognitive problems, with placement in facilities and that sort of thing is covered also in the general durable power of attorney. It's really a very important document. It's for most of us, well, we hope anyway, it's more important than our will, because we hope that we'd be using the power of attorney before we'd be using the will. And did I say in the beginning, a power of attorney is like appointing an executor while you're alive. This is a person who can do anything you can do and can do it for you. People ask and concern themselves very much with who should they pick as a person to do this. I mean, it's very important. Sometimes it's very logical. Again, it used to be no more than a couple of decades ago, for a married couple, you didn't need to do a power of attorney, because you just picked up the phone and said, I'm the wife, sell 500 shares of AT&T, and that just happened. And now, of course, they say, so who are you and where's the piece of paper? And you say your husband was picked up on 17 for with a broken back and whatever else. Well, show us the piece of paper. We don't want to give you any information. So even husband and wife really need this document. Not a lot of options in terms of what you're going to say in this. It's, as I say, it's pretty standard kind of stuff. The living will, as we see, will be a little different. But who are you going to pick? Someone who's geographically close is helpful, but not necessary, because you may be doing very mundane things. I mean, again, it can encompass everything from someone has an accident or a stroke or something like that, everything from cleaning out the refrigerator to making major decisions about medical and other kinds of treatments. You want to pick somebody that you trust. And this is interesting. Some people come in, they say they want to do a power of attorney, and they'll name somebody, but they'll say, but wait a minute, is this effective now? If I sleep a little late, can this person go into my bank accounts and take everything out? And yeah, the fact of the matter is, yes, if you deliver the thing, that's absolutely the case. And I say to them, well, if that's the case, then why are you naming this person as your power of attorney if you don't trust them? I had one, but it can get a little nastier than that. I had one where the father was absolutely incompetent. I mean, there was no question about that. And he had appointed the number one son as the power of attorney, and he had the control over the bank account, and he just treated the bank account like his personal piggy bank. He was writing checks for his wife's hairdresser and the kids' clothes, his kids' clothes, and all that sort of thing. So have some concern about who you're thinking of appointing. And competence, of course, that's just, you want to appoint somebody who's going to have some idea of what they're doing. I was going to say, speaking of fiduciaries, people you appoint, whether it's power of attorney or executors, people like that, I find people tend to fall into certain categories. I mean, some do it right, but some are what I call get it all done today type people. That's a bull in a china shop. Let's just move ahead. There's no reason we can't finish this by 4:30 this afternoon, and that can be dreadful sometimes. Opposite, the procrastinator, and this is a psychological thing. It's always children who are just, for whatever reason, when they're appointed to the position, are just not able to function. They just don't do anything. Rest of the kids, siblings, push them, just don't get anything done. And then, of course, there's the revenge control freak. Typically, this is the oldest son who finally has a chance to get back at his sister, who abused him, called him names or made fun of him or something at Thanksgiving 40 years ago. You remember that time? And this is their opportunity, because now he's got control over this thing and whatever. People you appoint and considerations about that, very, very important. Let's talk about the living wills. The living will in New Jersey is a document that talks about life and death decisions only. the term, and it's not funny, but it's a term, and frankly, we use it sometimes in the office. Is that it's the pull the plug document. In other words, that's what we're dealing with. It's a document that is only effective when you're not able to make decisions for yourself, and when you are effectively medically dead, brainwave dead. And the statute actually talks about this with very specifics. If you're in a cancer situation, doctors will make a determination that you cannot live more than a few months or whatever. So it's not, again, clients come in and they're concerned that someone is they're gonna sleep a little late and someone's gonna pull the plug, and it doesn't happen that way. But it's life and death decisions only. It covers two things. One, what your intentions are. What are your intentions if you get into an end of life kind of situation? Do you want a feeding tube? Do you want to get resuscitated, which is also covered with another document? What kinds of actions do you or treatments would you want to have or not want to have when you're in that situation? And the second thing that the document does is it appoints, you don't have to, but it appoints a proxy, a person to, in effect, advocate for the positions that you're putting forth in that document. Now, I have a form that I use, and I know it works, and that's fine. And we talk about it, at least generally, with clients when I talk to them. But we usually don't get into a lot of detail about that. I say I have a form. There's frankly, for this one, this is a lawyer. Lawyers never say that you don't need a lawyer, but there are forms. Valley has a form. There's forms called 5 Wishes, which is very popular. That's forms you'll find on the internet. Frankly, any of these will work from the point of view of the words that are in them if they're satisfactory to you, assuming they're executed properly. That's fairly important. But most people don't delve into the specifics of what's in the living will and what they really want. They really don't get into that kind of thing. At least they don't with me at all. I have some examples. This client who was specific, very unusual, specific about saying they did not want an anticoagulant because this could make them go blind, and if they went blind, they didn't want to live. There was a story mentioned in a prior seminar, Pat, I don't remember where it came from, about a man who was asked what he wanted to do to continue living. And basically what he said was, if I can't watch Sunday afternoon football and eat chocolate ice cream, I don't want to live. I don't know quite how you put that into writing, but that was what somebody said. I had a close family member myself who was diagnosed suddenly with stage 4 lung cancer a number of years ago. And, he just went into the system and didn't do anything, just didn't take a hold of any of this sort of thing. What he did was, not to get into a lot of specifics, but it's fairly customary in that kind of circumstance. With stage 4 lung cancer, it goes into the brain, and you can have radiology to the brain and radioactive treatment, and that can sometimes give you a few more weeks or something like that. The problem is there's about a 75% chance that you will, in effect, lose significant cognitive ability if you do that. And whatever, he just did that, and within a week, I mean, he was basically just not himself. So he only had another 4 months, but for those 4 months, he had nothing. He had no quality of life. He had no ability to say goodbye. He had no opportunity to make any other kinds of decisions. And it was sad to see. There, he just let the medical profession make its suggestions, and he died a difficult death. When you don't make your own suggestions, you give up that power to someone else and end up living on someone else's terms. What you need to do is have a discussion with family, whatever gets it started, but you need to try and have this kind of discussion. If you need to discuss it with spiritual professionals, I mean, we have them, of course, in the church. Everybody there is qualified for this, but it's not an easy thing to do. You need to do it, and you need to express those things in writing if you're doing a living will, yes, but to the kids, to your spouses. I tell the stories, back to talking about women are the ones who are more insightful, and they ask more questions than they whatever else. I've had a couple of situations where I sit with a couple, and these are long-term couples. Everything's fine. They're not going anywhere. They're perfectly happy, whatever else. And they will sit, we'll ask the question about the living will, and they'll say, well, kind of a side story. The guy typically he may say no, he doesn't want to do it. He just can't deal with it at all. But the woman will say, yes, I want to have one, but I don't want to name my husband as the one to make decisions for me. And it's not because she's afraid that he's going to pull the plug. It's because she's afraid he's not going to pull the plug. And they've said that. I've had that conversation with clients in the office. And the guy goes, yeah, you're right. I mean, so interesting kind of whatever. Let's talk just briefly on some of the other forms. New Jersey has fairly recently put together what is called a POLST form, and I can never remember it, so I have to read what it means. It doesn't make any sense, but practitioners' orders for life-sustaining treatment. I think either every state but a couple now has a similar kind of form. And what this is a very important change. The statute specifically says that it's designed not for just everybody, not for younger people or not for healthy people. It is designed for persons with advanced chronic progressive disease, such as dementia, life expectancy of less than 5 years. I think the statute says it's generally not recommended for people under age 80. I believe that number is actually in there. And what it is in New Jersey, see if you can see, oh, look at this. Yes, it comes out everything. It is green. I'm told that it's green so that people can see it's a different color than every other document that's in the patient's file. Pat, you don't call them files in the medical profession. What do you call them? Anyway.
Your chart?
Chart, thank you. I knew this. And it is a short, really one-page form. It is not a legal document. Lawyers don't do this. This is a document which you do with your physician and must be signed off on by your physician or nurse practitioner. And it deals with very simple issues, medical interventions. What would you like, if something happens to you, what would you like to have? Do you want to have full treatment of everything or limited treatment? Or do you want to have symptom treatment only for if you need resuscitation or that sort of situation? And it deals with artificially administered fluids and nutrition, and whether you want CPR and whatever else. And you sit down with a doctor and does that. And it has the advantage of it is a doctor's order. So when it's in your chart, it's a doctor's order. A living will is legally valid, but that's fine. What happens is then the person who's named as the proxy in the living will that I've prepared in our conference room, and we've all sat there, we're all wearing coats and ties and look very nice and everybody's healthy and it's lovely. And then you get into this hospital situation and dad is now in a mess, whatever else. And the daughter who's been named on the living will as the proxy comes in and says, he doesn't want to be plugged in or whatever else, but one of the other children comes in and says, I don't know, I don't agree. And the doctors, because some of my brethren are going to want to sue them, the doctor will probably at least for a while, pull back on exercising the living will. The concept of the post form is that it's doctor's orders, and it's been signed by the patient. It's been signed by the doctor or a doctor of a doctor who is the person's physician, and in effect, not a matter of overriding. It's a more operative document than the living will, which is like a legal document. Very important concept. We just did one of these for a client a couple of weeks ago, and he basically said he's 95, had just had hip surgery. They were talking about he's 95, he survived the hip surgery, but if he wants to go walking around, they think they need to go in and replace a heart valve, do open heart surgery and replace a heart valve. At any rate, he determined that he, in his pulse form, he said, I don't want pain and I don't want any surgery. And that's operative, that will control. I'm not really going to talk at any length, but there are, you will have heard of these anyway, there are what are called DNRs, do not resuscitate. That is not a legal form, that is a medical form, which is typically filled out and executed at a nursing home or facility, and it becomes part of your chart. Do not hospitalize is a form which is typically used in a nursing home, and what it means is if there's some distress that happens, you don't want the person is designated that they don't want to go to the hospital. Whatever care is to be taken care of will be taken care of at that facility. Not going to talk about it, although we could answer questions, not that I'll have any answers, but New Jersey has fairly recently passed a medically assisted dying law, which now is in effect. There have been, as I read about it, there have been about 45 in the last year and a half that it's been effective. That is from middle of 2019 to 2020, about 45 assisted dying situations in New Jersey. Summarizing, by dealing with and handling these issues for yourself and communicating to loved ones before your end of life crisis, you avoid the dilemma for a loved one who otherwise has to say, you made me make a choice based on what I want. You should have given me a choice based on what you want. Thanks.
Thank you, Don. That is just so helpful. There's a question here. Does the pulse form need to be signed by your own doctor, or could it be signed by a family member who is a physician?
Doc, that's a tough one. You should be a lawyer. I don't really know the answer to that question, but I would say what it is if you go to put it the other way around. Is it void because you go to a doctor who is also a family member? No, not necessarily. If the doctor, if he's a physician and he signs off on it, there's no reason why that shouldn't be effective. Is that sort of answering the question? Do I get a head shake? No, I don't.
She's not sure. She's going to write. Sure. She has a cup. Okay. I
mean, if a family member is a physician, and he's, if maybe he's not treating you normally, but if he signs off on this form, I mean, he's got certain ethical and legal responsibilities. If he feels he's okay doing that, then yes, I don't see any reason why it can't be. I mean, some of us have physicians. Yeah, I got to tell the story. Sorry. My daughter's a physician, and she's an oncologist. She doesn't, thank goodness, doesn't treat me at this point anyway. But she, I talked to her about, because she's an internist too, of course. I mean, she's had internist training. And I talked to her about things, and I would use her, and she could very well sign off on this thing. I have to announce, incidentally, my daughter, you know, the whole thing about physicians, heal thyself, physician. My daughter just fell off a horse 2 weeks ago and broke her neck. But well, it's a bit dramatic. I mean, she broke 2 vertebrae, but that's what happens when you're a doctor. Be a lawyer, you don't do those things.
Okay, does that help, do you want to follow up with that, Dorothy?
I just wanted Don. I just wanted to say I was concerned about maybe our daughter is a doctor, and I'm wondering if she would be the one to do that. But I don't know if that would be too emotionally charged. That's where I was going.
For her,
with
you
that.
mean.
For her, yeah. Oh yeah. Well, I could see that. I could see that. Yeah. I mean, you would know that I'm kind of responding from a legal point of view. That legally, I think it's perfectly valid. But I could see having a problem with that, because it's. I mean, consider it's not just you. Well, it could be you going now, but I mean, it's you further down the road. You know, with and you're in some kind of an extremis kind of situation, and yeah, I think that's pretty emotional for her.
Yeah.
I can see
Gotta
it.
think about it.
Same way with my daughter, but my daughter is not my regular physician. I would do it with somebody else.
Yeah.
Just to jump in a little bit on that, I think too, the purpose of the post form is that your treating physician knows what you want. And it's really about having the conversation, right? So of course you're going to have the conversation with hopefully your family, but having your conversation with your practitioner and then going through that form, that provides a lot of information for your physician to be able to help the family and say, we've talked about this. This is what we've gone through. And this is what this is what your mom would like. So I don't know if that helps at all.
Well said. I think it does.
Okay. Another question, what is an advance directive and how does this differ from a living will?
Yeah, I didn't really cover that, and I should have. The concept of a living will, and they go by different names. It's really the same thing. I mean, the lawyer calls it a living will. I think it's actually called in New Jersey. I think it's called an advance directive, and a living will is kind of the marketing, pardon the expression, the marketing term. So there isn't any difference, is the short answer.
Okay, great. And then another question, what's the difference between the power of attorney and the executor of an estate?
It's actually good question. They're different functions. The executor of an estate functions after you die, and a power of attorney functions in the capacity until you die, and the power of attorney ends when you die. The function, the responsibilities are, I say similar, can be or typically are the same. That is, there is full responsibility for handling asset to material kinds of things, if that's what you're talking about, for either one, for an executor after you die, for power of attorney before you die.
Great.
I have a question. Excuse me. Can the same person be the power of attorney and the executive of the estate? Is that possible to assign the same person for both jobs, or
Absolutely, and it's pretty common actually that's the case, because we'll typically name. Well, we'll name spouses if we have spouses. We'll typically name a particular child. We usually feel pretty good about. I mean, it always used to be the oldest child, which is never seemed to work all that well. But we all have an idea of kind of which child is the better one to handle that sort of thing. And typically, yes, we would name that person for the executor after we die and before we die as the power of attorney. Absolutely.
Great. Good
Okay.
questions. So Mark Brannon has a couple of questions he'd like to ask. So Mark, why don't you unmute yourself and you can ask some questions?
Great, thank you. I actually, first a comment, my father did a power of attorney, actually both my parents did before, and my mother passed away, then my father ended up getting dementia. and Alzheimer's. And that power of attorney for him, I was the POA, made a huge difference. It allowed him and everything else to continue along that was needed at the time, including selling some assets, taking care of day-to-day checks and other things. And I never had a problem with it. It actually surprised me how easy it was once it was being executed. Anyway, my two questions are, with POAs and I guess living wills, can you or should you name successor proxies? I name Gay as my person for a living will, but we're both in an accident, both get hurt. I mean, so do you have successor, or do you just do another one if that changes? And then I have a follow-up question.
You better not do the follow-up, because I'm not good with that. I will forget. So let me handle it. Let me handle it one at a time, and I'll count on you to remember your second question.
I have it written down.
Good. That's very good. Yes, absolutely. I didn't say that, but that's all I mean, it's really, as far as I'm concerned, it's malpractice on my part if I didn't at least push you to try and name a successor, because you have no idea, who's going to, I mean, heaven forbid, predecease, or there can be lots of other reasons for not being able to either able or unwilling to perform the duty. So absolutely, yes.
Okay, and the follow-up is actually a slightly different question. I'm old enough to have known the medical power of attorney. Is that now superseded by the living will, or is that a separate document, or is it part of the regular POA?
The medical power, was your father in New York? No, he was
Yes.
in New Jersey.
Well, no, he was New Jersey and Florida, but it was.
Yeah, but the document, because there's different states kind of can use a little different nomenclature, but so you're onto something. But what I was saying was, in New Jersey, we do a medical power of attorney, but and I think most practitioners in Jersey anyway incorporate the medical power of attorney part of things in the general durable power of attorney.
Okay.
So it's going to allow you to sell stocks and bonds and real estate and all that, and make decisions about medical treatment. But you certainly need to have that. There's no question about it. You need to have that. In New York, for instance, now New York breaks by statute, breaks it into two different documents.
Okay.
Which probably is not a bad idea.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. These are great questions. Another question, Don. If you have 4 competent children, how do you decide who is executor?
Well, first of all, you immediately come to church, because anybody who has 4 competent children is just blessed. They are absolutely blessed. That's a good question. And the way I would answer it is this. If everything is equal, and it never is, but if everything is equal, then you could pick one who is closer, perhaps geographically closer. Sometimes that makes sense. Someone who has, I mean, you can think about common kinds of thoughts like that. What I want to get at is, you have, typically you'll have 4 competent children, but you also have some emotions in there. So if you name, the oldest son, then the next one, who really thinks he's more competent than the other one, is jealous about, and you get into this sort of stuff. So what you can do is, and there's other reasons for wanting to do this, you can name co-executors or co-powers of attorney. In other words, 2 people acting together. 4, you could name 4 together. That's cumbersome, but it can be done. Or what you can do is name, because, and I call this family politics. If it's, if somebody's going to get their whatever in whatever, what you can do is name all 4, and then when they all stare at each other, they can say, well, okay, you 2 do it, or whatever. I don't need to do it, because it's no honor to do this. It's any of this stuff. It certainly isn't an honor. I'm not sure whether I'm answering that question, but it's if all is equal, then you just pick what seems the most practical, which could be closeness, just geographical closeness. Well, I wanted to say something on Mark raised a good question. On the powers of attorney, when he was saying, he did this power of the father, this power of attorney, he was able to sell properties and do all kinds of things, and it was all very easy. What I failed to say is that what the power of attorney, very important document, what the power of attorney does is it sets up a situation so that what you don't have to do is go for guardianship at that point. Because if you don't have a power of attorney, if you don't have somebody who can act, you've got to go into court. There's a couple of ways you can do it. One is very impractical, but the main one is guardianship. And guardianship means you get doctors to declare incompetency. If you happen to have someone who's an obstreperous older lawyer who's starting to lose cognitive ability, and but is difficult. I mean, it happens even with lawyers. And then they refuse. They say, no, I'm competent, and they fight the guardianship, and it's just a mess. So you appoint the power of attorney, and it's typically a smooth transition into letting the power of attorney act without having in an economical and efficient manner, as Mark described, without going to court.
Yeah, I think that is such an important point, because I do see that happening with people. Yeah. And there comes a point where you can't be the one to name what you'd like. So once again, if you want your wishes to be carried out, do them while you're fine and healthy and capable, which is today, because you don't know what tomorrow brings.
That was the point of the story about my daughter. I mean, she's just going along, everything's fine, 45 years old, and falls off a horse.
Yeah. Great. Alexis has a question she'd like to ask you. So please feel free to unmute yourself, Alexis.
Hi. So I don't know if this is a stupid question. No stupid questions, but this might be. If I went to, I want to do estate planning. I want to do this whole thing. And when you make an appointment with a lawyer to do estate planning, does that imply that you're going to be doing the will, power of attorney, or advance directive, like the whole shebang, or is it just your will and stuff like that?
Any attorney should be talking to you if you want to do estate planning. Any attorney should be talking to you about basically 3 documents. The will, which is designating what happens when you die, what happens with property, who handles your affairs after you die, and that sort of thing. A power of attorney, which we're talking about now, very important document, which is even at your age, something can happen. So you should have, and everybody should have a power of attorney. That's not a document for older people. And the concept of a living will, assuming you believe it. So yes, those 3 things are what you would deal with. I know you're thinking about, well, I should have a will in place in case I die, what happens? And absolutely you should have that, but you absolutely need to have the other 2. And they're part of a package. They should be looked at as a package.
Okay.
Of documents for you.
So this is, I know you're a lawyer, but if I was to do something
sorry about
like
that,
this,
I apologize for that.
It's okay. Someone's got to be.
Yeah, right.
So is it possible to DIY this, or do you need a lawyer present to take you through all this documentation?
Yeah, as you say, somebody's got to be a lawyer. So I'm a lawyer. So I can't tell you not to use a lawyer. I'll tell you, I think in the next generation, few years, you probably won't need a lawyer to do most of that stuff. In other words, you'll be able to do it online and get forms and whatever from the internet. I'm really not comfortable. I know it sounds self-serving, but I'm really not comfortable having people using internet wills at this point. It's just because the problem is, if something happens to you, you're not around, and if you've messed it up, you've messed it up. Powers of attorney, not too bad, the ones I've seen online, but I don't know. You can tell I'm not comfortable. Frankly, though, I think we're fairly close to where, as with a lot of things, you don't need a lawyer for, I mean, leases now and contracts and that sort of thing, you get them off the internet, and a lot of that stuff isn't too bad. I still would recommend using a lawyer. And it doesn't
Thank you.
have to be, I mean, you can spend a lot of money if you want to, but it doesn't have to be particularly expensive or involved.
Don, would it make sense too? Because I think you're right. I think we're seeing a lot going forward with a lot of different of these forms that you can get them online, but still to be able to have, I keep coming back to having that conversation. Having a conversation that with someone who is knowledgeable, even if you want to have it all kind of put together, but maybe be able to bounce off, okay, am I thinking the right way? And just, it really, you want to have it right, because if it's not right, you're not going to be able to tell. You're not going to be able to do anything about it once, you're not able to speak. So a lot of those things do make a difference.
I agree, but I'm not wanting to say tonight that you should do all this. This is all just with a lawyer. I think there's a lot of other communication. I mean, that's the point of tonight. I mean, if you're talking to me as a lawyer, I'm going to say, yes, this is the way to do it, and you'll get it done right, and so on and so forth. But for the general kind of topic of getting into more communication about this sort of thing, I mean, I would like to see clients doing better and more extensive communication, not just with me, but with others, with their family, with people like Pat and Liz. I mean, spiritual professionals, social work, whatever, anybody to just talk and communicate about this sort of stuff. And that isn't necessarily going to happen or needs to happen through a lawyer's office. That's not take away from what you just said. I mean, to get it done right, yeah, for a lot of it, I still think you need a lawyer for this stuff. Yeah.
Okay. Another question. How often should you update these documents if you have already done one?
No set rule. It's good, very good question, because it's like looking at insurance or your investments or anything else. You should be in touch every once in a while to look at things. The idea of doing these documents is that you don't have to come in and see a lawyer and spend money every year or two. So they're done in a way that you don't have to do that. But every few years, it's a good idea just to go in for a checkup. I have clients who do that, and it works out very well. And certainly if there are certain major changes in the tax law, major changes in your family situation or life, health situation, and that sort of thing.
Okay, does that answer the question? Okay, great. So Don, I'm not sure if you can help with this, but can you give a ballpark price for what these services might be? That's another question. Okay.
No, sorry, I just can't do that.
Okay. Thank you. So we have a little bit more time. Any other questions? You can feel free to unmute yourself and ask the question, or if you'd like, put it in the chat. Don, it's been great. Toby, yeah.
Yeah, I'd just like to make a few comments. Yes, I totally applaud having an advance directive. More importantly, have that advance directive and discuss it in detail with your family members, especially your kids, who are very reluctant to sit down and talk about these issues. But it's important that you do. It's also important that you discuss it with your physician. However, having done all of that and having multiple copies made so that they are in every healthcare chart that you have in whatever institution you see, there are problems because you end up in an accident. You are brought into an emergency room. They don't have immediate access to that advance directive. And so they go ahead and they do whatever they can do to try to save your life. Then it becomes an issue once everyone then, you're in the ICU, you are hooked up to everything. And then it becomes an issue of how do we handle that situation? And the people, unfortunately, who are having to deal with this are the intensive care unit physicians. Now, I will commend them. They are quite good, but it's not so simple. I certainly, I have an advance directive. I've discussed it with everyone. I've had patients that I have advance directives, multiple copies all over the chart. I even tried to plaster it onto the body of my patient so that she had it with her all the time. Discussed it with her family members and her daughter. And because I happened to be on vacation when she collapsed and went into end-stage liver disease failure, everything was done. And so I find her on all kinds of life-saving devices that she never wanted. And why? Because her daughter just didn't know if that was the time to pull back. So, I think people have to at least understand the reality, especially in this world where, we used to have a physician who used to take care of us not only in the office, but in the hospital as well. We don't have that anymore. So you have this poor schmo of an ICU physician who ends up having to do a lot more than he would ordinarily have to do. I feel very strongly about this. I've actually taught a number of classes myself in my former church. But I think people have to realize, have the discussions, have everyone that you know have the information about what you want. It's the only way to kind of assure that you're going to get what you want and not get a lot of things that you don't want. And that decision to pull back after all of that stuff is on board, that's a much harder decision, especially for children and family members.
Yeah.
So just my comments.
There's controversy.
Toby, that's an excellent articulation of kind of the other side of things. Or the practical side of things. And that's absolutely the case. I mean, we all hear cases of people who get hooked up and they, this and that and the other thing. And you articulated very much, and I have no answer to that.
No.
I mean, there isn't any answer. It's
We
just,
don't know.
we just don't. I often talk to people use what I call the clutch concept, the distinction between it's the clutch. The living will is the clutch between the medical profession and the legal profession, and it's the best we have. But it's
Right.
not perfect, and it doesn't work all the time. And a very good example is the situation where you have an accident and you've got your living wills plastered all over the place. And that's why sometimes they say, if it's an accident in the house, put one on the refrigerator door, and the EMTs, if they see it, they'll respect it. But the EMTs have a job to do. Their job is not to go looking for legal documents. Their
Right.
job is to, and pardon the expression, but is to plug you in until they know they can't, that they are not supposed to plug you in. And you've articulated very well that how things can go, and they do still. It's better than it used to be. Around here it is anyway, but thank you for that, because that's a good story.
You made the point.
Yeah, thank you, Toby, so much for that. I think that to different programs that we have done in the past, and I think ones that obviously we need to continue, it's the conversation. It's having those conversations that matter most. The documents are great. They're important. You can see how all of this supports it, but it's the support behind that conversation. Without that conversation, that's why this is the gift you can give your kids, because they know what you want. They don't have to guess. You're not putting them in that position of having to make the decision, because you've already made that decision for them. It is, I can't stress enough the gift that you continue to give. So you get the documents, you do all of these really good things, but you have those conversations. And so, you know, I don't know if there's some other questions yet tonight. We're pretty much out of time, but what
I
I
have
would
one.
really,
This is very important here. 11 years ago, both my mom and dad died like 10 months apart. My sister, my relative, was assigned the executor of the estate. And there were some things I was supposed to inherit from both my parents. 11 years has passed. I haven't seen anything in 11 years. Is there anything I could do about this?
Well, sure there is. I mean, that's not for me to answer now, but yes, you could talk to somebody, and if things were supposed to happen in a particular way and they haven't, it may not be too late. I mean, it sounds like there's a communication problem again. It's a different kind of communication problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
thank you,
And what you're talking about is not unusual. That's again, it's communication. It's you're talking about a will situation, but it's still communication. And it's, if the parents in the drafting and whatever of the will kind of document, I mean, it you know, it's not as subjective as living will kinds of considerations, but I mean, they need to think. I mean, they appointed, I guess what you're saying is they appointed your sister and that just didn't work.
Yeah,
It didn't work for you anyway. Yeah. But
I mean, I know it's 11 years later, but it's been haunting me for 11 years. There was some stuff that I'm not saying it's worth money. It's just priceless. And I never got anything at all. Nothing.
Well, thank you, Deborah. That's, I mean, again, to the point of having those conversations, right?
Yeah.
Does Kathleen have, do you have your hand up maybe for the last question?
Are you talking to me?
No, Kathleen Tierney.
Oh,
No. Oh, you have to unmute if you did want to. I just saw your hand up.
There you go.
Sorry, I do not have my hand up, but it was a wonderful conference. Thank you very much. I don't know why that's there. I don't have my hand up.
No problem. I'll lower it for you. Okay.
Thank you.
Well, so, okay.
may I just bring up one thing, please?
Sure. This has got to be the last one. Go ahead, Kitty.
Yeah. Going back to what that lady Toby said, I mean, right now at Valley Hospital, you have a hospitalist taking care of you if you're a patient. Your personal physician does not go there.
That's
so what good is having a discussion with your physician?
Well, your physician, I mean, talking it over with your physician is really important. It's your family members mostly that are going to be the ones that are going to inform that hospitalist what you want. And then the documents, once again, can come along and support it. But your primary care physician can also, you know, the kids can always have that person, you know, chime in. But you're right. That's, I think, to Toby's point, there are so many people now that are not primary in your care. And so finding the best way to have your wishes carried out, conversation. So I think what this surely has pointed is that this is a conversation that needs to continue.
This is a good time of the year to have it too.
Yes. So we will think about how to incorporate another one of these, maybe a little more specific to about how to have those conversations with your family on another Wellness Wednesday. But for now, we would like to thank Don. Don, there's all kinds of thank yous in the chat here for your beautiful, wonderful presentation. Your humor and your guidance are just so appreciated. So thank you very, very much. And we would like to wish all of you a beautiful and loving Thanksgiving filled with joy and just lots of love, however you safely do that this year. We will not be meeting next week, but we invite you back December 1st, where we will be having a service both in person and live streamed. And it will be a service to remember the losses that we've had, and we'll light candles and just bring that time of the season of the holidays that can be difficult for many to get through, and just remember those that we love. So thank you for all being here. And as Liz so beautifully says each week, we leave you to be well. Thank you.